Live from Kakariko Village. Broadcast throughout the Retroverse, transmitted to the real world via a maze of wires connecting a Super Nintendo to a Wii, to a Wi-Fi network, and finally to the internet. The Techno Funk Boy presents the Retro Zoo Super Show. Now here are your hosts, Kai and Steven.
Well, greetings one and all. This is the Retro Zoos Super Show, and I am your host, Kai. Merry Christmas, everyone. This is as close as we are going to get to to Christmas, being mere few days away, depending on when you download and listen to the podcast. It might be July, in which case, 5 more months, and it'll be back. So, Christmas is one of my favorite times of year, and I'm always very excited this time of year. And so we have actually a lot to do today, and so we need to get on it. For those of you who joined us last week, and this is the first time ever that I'm going to say these words, but if you did not listen to last week's episode, you need to hit stop right now, and you need to go back, because this, while we've done several series before, each episode has been able to stand on its own. But last week we did start a story, and we're going to continue that story. We read part 1 last week. I promised the concluding part this week. But we are going to recap a little bit, but it's going to be better for you if you just go back and listen to the previous episode. So, the reason for those who do listen as soon as these episodes come out or listen live, the reason we are a day late is because part 2 of the story actually grew into 3 parts. I mean, two separate parts. So the total number of parts for this story are 3. And so literally this segment that we're going to be reading today turned out to be twice as long as originally intended, which is fine. I think it came out great, but it also meant that it took a little bit of extra effort to get it all together and to get to you. So I definitely did. I did promise that we were going to finish it this week, and I did want to do that. So we are going to finish the story this week. Before we jump into it, though, the 8-bit version of Angels We Have Heard on High that you heard last week and you're hearing again this week as kind of the theme for the Christmas story, which has absolutely nothing to do with Christmas at all, is a Techno Funk Boy song. It is something that we recorded especially for y'all, and you can get that for free at technofunkboy.com/angels. So very simple, and I hope that you'll get it. The link is in the show notes. If you're driving and do not want to wreck your car just trying to write stuff down, that's fine. The link is in the show notes. I do encourage you to get that and enjoy. Merry Christmas. Next week we're going to do a kind of end of the year, beginning of the year episode. You do not want to miss that. There's a lot of stuff we're going to be doing in the next year, a lot, and you don't want to miss it. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for music, for, different fun projects. And we're really excited about 2019. We have a lot of stuff that we want to do. So, some stuff you need to do. First of all, download the song. Secondly, if you're on Discord, get on our Discord server. The link is also in the show notes. You're pulling up the show notes anyways to get that free song. Hit that Discord server as well. If you'd like, we have our Facebook page on there as well. We're trying to do more on Discord at this time. And so, I do encourage you to jump over there. But tune in next week. It's going to be a great show. We're going to be announcing a lot of stuff that we're going to be doing, and you don't want to miss that. So without further ado, please do enjoy the end of the story. I had a lot of fun doing this one, and I hope that you're having a lot of fun listening. The story is called The Glitch Between Worlds. Let's jump into it. So last time in part 1, and I'll say we, because this is a story about Stephen and Drum and me. We were preparing for our morning broadcast, and when we noticed a little too late that Drum was missing, and we followed him through the Lost Woods and to the mist that it kind of becomes a barrier between the worlds of the Retroverse, and the mist has been mapped and is passable at certain points, but a lot of it has not been completely mapped, and this was one of those spaces. And so Stephen and I went through in search of Drum, and we landed in a modern survival horror game, and it is that place where we left off, and it is that place that we shall resume. The Glitch Between Worlds, Part 2, Widowmaker 433. An innocent enough thing, I suppose, I said, slowly circling the prone and bound figure that was whimpering, helpless in the snow. I tossed the rock in the air and caught it without looking. Coming near, tracking me, looking for food. And then things turn. Then suddenly, you are the hunted. The wolf growled at me, but didn't rise. Not that it could. The trap had been carefully laid, and it had sprung soundly enough. I threw the rock in response, and the growl trailed off back into whimpering. I laughed. I would make this last. I would enjoy this. Or maybe I wouldn't. There was a sharp cry from over in the forest, and I turned suddenly toward it, gazing over the snow-covered ground through the blood-tinged dusk of the land of Noranthadrel, the snowy plains on the north side of the massive game Weatherclaw. The title had earned a modest following, perhaps more cult classic than smash hit, but for a few of us, we recognized what it was, a huge step forward in bringing sprawling open worlds to survival horror games, and it was really good at what it did. It let us be a part of the horror and not just react to it. I smiled at the call and immediately forgot about the trapped wolf. It would be dead by the time I got back, but I did not then realize where this new journey would take me. At the time, I thought I would be back relatively quickly. I shot forward with unearthly speed, but still quiet as a white rabbit on the snowy hill. I was over-leveled for this area, but then again, I was over-leveled for nearly all of the areas of the game. It didn't keep it from being fun. My bow was already in hand with an arrow nocked, and I was one with the wind, scurrying over the embankment and into the leafless forest, the frozen trees standing as cold reminders that death is the greatest of conquerors. As I was coming closer to the sound, I pressed my back against a tree for cover as I surveyed the scene behind me from over my shoulder. It wasn't difficult to see what was happening. 2 figures were racing toward the west, and by the sound I knew what was in pursuit. The 2 were, well, at first I thought they were newbies by their dress, completely inappropriate for the zone. But that was weird. I might be over-leveled for this area, but it wasn't a low-level zone, to be sure. How they got here at their apparent level was quite an accomplishment. There were no teleports or traveling spells in this game. You earned your way from place to place. Or perhaps the clothes were a ruse. Perhaps the whole thing was a ruse. That didn't seem too likely since the wargs were closing in, but it was at least plausible. Well, if this were a trap, I was the wrong person to trap. And if they were higher level than they seemed, there was loot to be gained. And if they actually were noobs, then they would learn the nature of this place. I was around the tree in a moment, an arrow already in the air. It whistled right past the pair of fleeing figures, probably before they even saw me, and continued behind them, greeting the warg's open craw right as it was coming over the ridge. It was a white one of the tougher enemies in Noranthendrel. The creature was as large as a man, and larger still than that elf coming my way. Their eyes glowed if you caught them at the right angle, and their patchy fur revealed something rotten beneath, a putrid and decaying skin that was balmy to the touch. It's one of the things that made this particular area hard. Wargs weren't good eating, and they normally ate the things that were good eating. They hunted in packs, and they would stalk you for miles, making sure you didn't get any nourishment on the way. That one whimpered. It was a good shot, but not quite enough. The next one through its eye did fine, though. But there were more behind it, and my 3rd arrow was in the air. This one came a little too close to the elf. A slip in the aiming, I assure you. And he dived down to get out of its path. It was then that I noticed for the first time that he wasn't quite dressed like a newbie, though it seemed like it at first. What was this? The human kept coming. "Oh, please help," he said. I used my bow like a staff then, sweeping his leg underneath himself so he fell into the snow. In a moment, another arrow was in the air, and a second warg fell. There was one then, and I got my sword to finish things. I sidestepped its leaping attack while my swing knocked it to the side. It slid on the icy ground, unceremoniously thumping into the snowbank. I was upon it then, and there was a growling and a snapping, but mostly for show, and then there wasn't any more. "What did you do that for?" the human said, standing up now. My bow was out again, and the arrow was trained on him. I was able to see him clearly for the first time, and what I saw stopped me. I had a prepared speech about giving me your stuff, blah, blah, blah. But by this point, I was sure of what was beginning to dawn on me earlier. These 2 weren't newbies. In fact, I had never seen their clothes in game at all. They were wearing something completely foreign to my experience in Weatherclaw. Which meant I thought, as my bowstring wavered for a moment, something was very wrong if these 2 were so strong they had clothing that I hadn't even gotten to see yet. I guess the 3rd option was that there was new DLC that I didn't know about yet, but that was pretty unlikely. "Whoa, man," the human said, his arm suddenly up. He was still holding the stick he had been carrying, I suppose as a weapon? The elf dragged himself up, groaning as he came. "I mean, thanks a lot for taking those things out," the human said, "but no need to keep the metaphorical bow drawn, or the literal bow drawn, for that matter." "What are you?" I said, looking at him. He shrugged. A keyboardist? We made a fire quickly and the two warmed up. Both taking a dive into the snow had chilled them greatly, and this was no place to be when your clothes were damp and you were already cold. The winter would prey upon that. We're looking for a friend, the elf said. Well, he's a robot. Robot, I chuckled. You're in the wrong game for that. Medieval setting around here. I know, the elf, who had introduced himself as Kai, went on. He wandered through the mist, the border between games. It was an accident. I laughed. You're here on a glitch? These modern games were so buggy. But I had already guessed that something was wrong. Their look was completely out of character for this game, so I had already assumed some unused portion of the game's memory got turned up somehow. But now we're lost, the elf was saying. When we came through, we got attacked by some zombie-looking things and beat them back. I beat them back, the human said. That's what I said, the elf retorted. When those wolf things attacked and proved a little tough for us, so we fled. Smart, I said. The zombies are like level 3, maybe 5 tops. The wargs are nearer to 30. The white warg is one of the toughest overworld creatures in this zone. Well, we're glad we found you then, the elf said. We're totally lost and not sure how to get back, or where Drum went. The robot. Okay, I thought. I'll bite. Probably be a fun afternoon diversion. I stuck out my hand. I'm Widowmaker 433. The human chuckled. There were 432 Widowmakers before you? He asked as he shook my hand. That was rhetorical. He didn't wait for a response. Steven, this is Kai. I already knew that. Pleasure, Kai said, shaking my hand. I'm a ranger in this game, I lied. I should be able to track a robot. The light in their eyes brightened, which is what I was hoping for. It would be a lot of fun to put that light out. I walked in front and took time to look at the ground periodically. I can, in fact, track relatively well, especially since I'm a high level in this game. But I, of course, had no intention of looking for that stupid robot, even if there was one. I had no problem with the idea that these two NPCs were part of the game's unused assets, but it was highly doubtful a robot was amongst those unused assets. Well, unless there had been like an original ending of the game that turned it into science fiction, like original Final Fantasy or Star Tropics, something like that. I hadn't heard anything like that, and I was pretty well read about Weatherclaw, but I suppose it was possible. In any case, I wasn't actually looking for this robot at all, but it would be fun to make them think I was for a little bit. I had them take me back as far as they could remember to the place they were realizing they were lost. And then after a few minutes, I found a trail that would lead us more to a place of my own liking. You can see the footfalls here, I said, pointing at the icy ground. They nodded and make noises like they saw them too, but there weren't any there. Funny how people do that when they don't want to spend time really examining something. Truth be told, I was enjoying it all the more that they trusted me so implicitly. Goodness, my name is Widowmaker 433. That should have been a clue as to my alignment. I'm being silly, of course. NPCs aren't programmed to examine names, discern alignment. I was impressed at how advanced these two were. What a shame that they had been left in the unused segment of the programming, never to be shown off, but they weren't so advanced that they were going to start picking up on the subtle clues I was setting down in front of their faces. This way, I said dramatically, scurrying along the path in a half-crouch with my bow and arrow at the ready. All for show. There were no enemies in the area. I would have seen them long before on my screen's radar. Earning mastery over any particular enemy, 100 kills, meant that it would no longer be able to hide from me, even if its stealth rating was high, and I had mastered all of the enemies in Noranthrandrel. We hurried for the next few hours in game time, maybe 15 minutes in real world time, breaking only for a short meal. They of course had nothing. I assumed I would not be able to loot anything off their bodies. Probably never got that far into the programming of the game for that. But it was hardly the point, was it? Down into a dried-up creek bed we went, the gray, leafless trees crowding in on that winding path like walls. A lone skeleton entered my radar in the northwest. It might be a good idea to chase after it and letting it surprise these two. I could make a dramatic rescue of them to reinforce me as their savior. But no, Let's keep going. As much as I wanted to, I didn't have time to spend all night toying with these two. He traveled a long way, Kai said. He's on foot though, right? Not rolling? I nodded. He seems to be limping a little, favoring the other foot pretty heavily. I pointed to the ground for effect. But definitely on foot. Was he rolling when you last saw him? When I looked up, I realized I had said something wrong. Kai was looking at me with narrow eyes. Other foot? He asked, his lips dry. My eyes were locked on his for a moment as I tried to understand what he was alluding to, but the realization hit me only just before a fist did that I should have been looking at Stephen. The blow was massive and sent me tumbling into the snow with a grunt. That guy was stronger than he looked. I coughed as a cloud of smoke fluttered around me, blocking my vision as I got to my feet. I had held on to the bow, thankfully, but the two were mostly up the bank by that point, the snow still surrounding me like a cloud. I stepped forward to clear my vision and let an arrow loose as soon as I was able. It thudded into the wall of the stream bed with a thump, but a full foot away from Kai's leg as it disappeared over the side. I cursed as soon as I let loose of the arrow, knowing it had missed, but there wasn't time for another. I scrambled then, running up that slope like my life depended on it. My skills were finally honed, and I was at the top much more quickly than they had been. But now I was in the dead forest, the massive gray monoliths all around on a bed of thick snow. It wouldn't be hard tracking them in there, but travel would be slow and tedious, and I wasn't sure how fast they were. They were certainly less encumbered than me, and that elf seemed pretty light. In fact, I saw a movie once where the elf was able to walk right on top of the snow like it was made of stone. I wasn't sure how accurate that was, though. Their path, like I predicted, was obvious. It was a gully made into the snow, a trench that they couldn't help but make, and weren't going to be able to hide very well, as thick as it was. I smirked at this, the anticipation bubbling in my mind. I followed, another arrow already nocked and ready. Oh, they were not being fast at all, and within a few minutes I caught sight of one. My arrow went wide. I didn't mind that time. I'd seen their abilities, and they wouldn't be able to escape. There would be plenty of chances for more shots. It was starting to get dark. That is the way it was with this game. Morning and afternoon were very short, but evening lasts for hours and night even longer. I wasn't afraid of the night, but it would certainly help them get away. No way they would survive, of course, but I would miss the fun. I realized I was smiling, and had been for a while. I needed to catch these two if I was going to sate my bloodlust that had been teasing its way through my veins for hours. I was enjoying the hunt, but I needed to be satisfied well, too. It was quiet then, so I silently ducked between two of the trees to change my approach, and then came forward another 10 yards. I waited then, pressing my back against the trunk of a great oak, and listened. Nothing. I chuckled. Too easy. They were trying to hide, as though there were not a trail through the snow leading me right to them. The snow picked up as the darkness pressed down on us, but I let the noise of the whistling wind cover my footsteps as I hurried forward another few yards. There's no way they heard me. I trained my character too much for this. Too many levels, too many ability points spent. I could sneak up on player characters across an open field, much less a couple of weird NPCs with the cover of a forest to use. As the wind died again, I waited, listening, watching. Nothing. I could almost smell the fear upon them. It must be excruciating for them, knowing that doom was coming, but unable to do anything about it. So I imagined, at least. None of this mattered. None of it made any difference once the game was shut off. What happens in Weatherclaw stays in Weatherclaw. That'd be a good slogan. The only thing that mattered was the joy of the kill. They would respawn. Or maybe not if they were nothing but leftover memory, but everything would reset back to right. That's the beauty of it. You can do whatever here. The reset makes it okay. You can destroy, tear down whatever you wanted, and it all got turned off with the power button. The reset button was all powerful. Again, I moved. This would be the last time. My bowstring was taut, my arrow ready. I would wing one and then move to the knife. The knife got you close. The human was the stronger one, so the arrow would be for him. but he could watch while I worked on his friend. I turned the corner around the tree, but no one was there. My eyes went wide and I looked for the path, but it led to this spot and no further.
You have been summoned,
a robotic voice said behind me. When I turned, all I saw were metallic limbs flailing around, and in a flash one sprang forward and clubbed me over the head. That is when things went black. Hey Drum, did you know that the Techno Funk Boy isn't just a group of podcast hosts that live inside a Super Nintendo?
Really?
That's right, we're also a band.
Tell me more.
We're a retro gaming inspired band that plays covers of classic video game themes, original game music, and other music in the style of classic games.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and you can find our first full-length album on iTunes, Amazon, and CD Baby. It's called The Final Fantasy Mixes, and it's an EDM tribute to some of Uematsu's best musical themes. Check the episode notes for links or go to Techno Funk Boy to learn more.
Techno Funk Boy sounds like the greatest band that has ever existed.
I programmed him to say that. Part 3. Drum. Drum rolled right off the edge, as Kai and Stephen had correctly discerned, but it was an inch or so to the left of where his friends would later travel. And that had been an unfortunate inch, because the glitch at that particular point between worlds was a soft-locking one that would get you stuck in a place until the game was reset or the timer ran out. Only resets were not something NPCs had control over, and there was no timer in Kakariko Village. In other words, he was trapped. Being relatively emotionless as he was, he took the realization rather well. He had been in the mist before, though normally on the finished trail, so he stared into the swirling whiteness calmly, waiting for the transition that would never come. He blinked. I mean, not literally, he doesn't have eyelids, but it was the sort of emotional impact of a blink, and it was evident. If his eyes were lit up, they would have dimmed a little. But they aren't. So again, just imagine it for the emotional impact, because in reality, he just didn't move at all. And that's not really good storytelling. Especially because he was there for a very long time. At one point, he saw the shadow of Kai and Stephen passing through, but as much as he tried to reach them, neither his voice nor grasp could escape the soft lock. He was surprised at this. A lot of times, even when soft-locked, you would still be able to communicate, but in this case, he was unable to interact at all with things around him. It was quiet then, the swirling mist continuing to swirl. He didn't have the same sort of fear run through him that Kai did, half because he is a robot, and half because Kai is more fearful than most. And there he waited. Like a rudderless ship adrift in the ocean, waiting for something to nudge him out of that place because he was incapable of doing anything about it himself. For hours it was, and it didn't just feel like hours, it was actually hours. Because of his internal clock, the way time felt was exactly how long time actually was. So after 4 hours or so, it felt pretty much like 4 hours. He settled in. It might be days before the next reset, and the chance of something bouncing him out were pretty much zilch. Until it happened. Drum was hardly paying attention when the wizard approached him. In fact, the man was right upon him when Drum looked up. His eyes went bright with alarm. Again, this didn't happen in reality. Emotional impact only. "Oh, there, the wizard said, looking carefully at the robot. "I'm here to help. Actually, I'm here to help someone else, but I need you in order to do it. There's a grave danger in another world, and you need to come with me." They began to move, the wizard by foot and Drum by magic. The man was tall, his gray robes fluttering about him, an impressive beard swaying with his movements, and a great hat about his head. His staff was of polished wood, but retained its natural look with knots and curves as it went. Drum wondered about his name, but the man answered right away without being asked. "Oh, I go by many names, but it is usually me who sends people on their way in this realm. I am the one who gives the sword, the one who points the way to the castle, the one who knocks on the door to begin a journey out there. The robot seemed satisfied with his answer, something innate in him understanding, though he could not know why. They were out of the mist in a moment and upon a great bridge. No, Drum realized, it wasn't exactly a bridge, but a drawbridge, one going into a massive castle, white and alight with the sun. It glowed with unearthly light, but it was not a light that blinded, but a light that made you understand what light really was and wonder. "Come," said the wizard, "we must hurry." He strode with long steps into the castle, and the guards standing at attention at the portcullis. They entered the grand entry of white and red and gold, of tapestries adorning the walls, telling of the exploits of Pac-Man, of Sonic and the Avatar, and many more. The chandelier burned with the brightness of 100 candles, and there was no shadow in that room. The man turned and leaned in toward Drum, placing a comforting hand on Drum's dome. "It's time to work. I'm sending you off to save someone, and it will be dangerous. You can fight, yes?" Drum agreed, and with a nod, finding himself unable to say anything in this man's presence, as though there were some understanding there that it wasn't an option. This was the thing that needed to happen. "Go," he said, "and you will need to hurry." With a wave of his hand, Drum's form dissolved into nothingness, and he was gone. It took 0.3 seconds for his light receptors to adjust to the late dusk of the snow-covered world he appeared in. But once they adjusted, he realized he couldn't see much besides some dead trees and a bunch of snow. But he heard things. The hurried flight of 2 people, the deliberate pursuit of another. Save someone, he was told. Well, he actually hadn't thought it was going to be quite so obvious. He moved quickly on 3 legs, even through the full foot of snow that had collected on the ground. Nor did he feel the cold, but rather went chasing the noises without making noise himself, using programming that Steven had put in, using a bit of the memory that normally was reserved for show prep, to scurry around the hunter and over to the prey. He came at them like lightning and was upon them before they could react. If his eyes could brighten with surprise, they would have. It was Steven and Kai. Well, he was certainly glad the wizard had brought him there, because he was hearing the pursuer moving suddenly, coming toward them, closer now than ever. He wrapped a tentacle-like arm around them just as Kai was mouthing, "Drum?" in surprise, and like that the spell took hold, and they were gone. The wizard looked them over, shaking his head. This was not what he had intended. Clearly, he had not expected Steven and Kai to have appeared with their robot savior. "These people are not the ones in danger, Drum," he said. His voice was compassionate but firm. "They, like you, are NPCs. They will respawn. They'd be shaken up a little, then go back to normal as quickly as a press of a button. It was the other one I wanted." The other one took some getting, but he was got, and he was laying over a couch beside a fire in one of the castle's upstairs rooms. He was kind of twitching a little bit, making grunting sounds at times. "How hard did you hit him?" Kai asked, looking with some amount of sympathy toward the man, but not enough to cause him to actually go over and care for him. Drum shrugged. "Not hard enough," Steven said. "Plenty hard," the old man said, taking a wet rag and wiping the dirt tenderly off of Widowmaker 433's face. "So I'm to understand," Kai said, not without some measure of annoyance, "that despite the fact that he was hunting us with a bow, you sent our robot to save him from us." "Not from you," the wizard said, dipping the cloth in the bowl of water before resuming his work. "From himself." He looked at Kai. "You are just fine and always will be. Quit being so dramatic. He is different." "Different how?" Kai said. "He's a player character, of course. Did you forget why we are all here in the first place?" Even Kai had to concede that point, but did so with a silent shaking of his head, and then in looking down, no longer arguing. A man was stirring, and in so apparently remembered what was happening, because his body suddenly jerked up and got tense, and his eyes went wide in panic. "Robot!" he said suddenly, then realized he was not being attacked. "Do you mind?" the wizard said simply, motioning up to his raised hand holding the damp cloth. Widowmaker had grabbed it in his panic, like he was blocking an attack. The younger man was panting, but he was calming, and he let the hand go. "Who are you?" he asked breathlessly. The old man shrugged and grunted as he stood and put his rag and bowl back on the far table. "You!" Widowmaker said as he saw Kai. Next he saw Stephen, then Drum, and he jumped a little at the sight of the robot. "You're safe here," the wizard said. "I don't recognize this place at all," he said. "And I thought I've been all over Weatherclaw. What is it called?" "Called?" the wizard said, sitting in a chair next to the couch. "I don't suppose it's called anything. It is the castle. It is the place of danger, but also victory. It's where the princess is, where the villain is, where you test your mettle to see what you've made of yourself." "Is that what you are?" he asked the wizard. "A princess?" "No, I mean, I know what you mean," the old man laughed. "I was having a little fun with you. I know you meant the final boss. No, I am not he." He leaned forward and retrieved a pipe from the folds of his robe. With slow contentment, he lit it and leaned back again, letting the full-bodied smell waft through the room. "What game are we in?" "Game? Well, not at all. Or perhaps we should say a great many of them at once. We are in a glitch, that is for sure, but it is some form of this place that all games seek after. Sometimes it appears as a dungeon, sometimes as a towering height, sometimes as a great ruin. The form it takes doesn't really matter, does it? It's the goal that is here, the finishing of things, the final confrontation." "So what is the goal here?" The wizard shrugged. "Depends on why you have come." Widowmaker 433 laughed nervously. I came here because a big robot clubbed me over the head." "Maybe, but that was within the game, not outside of it. Things happen in games that waylay us sometimes. Why were you in the game itself?" "Fun, I guess." "There's plenty of that here if that's what you have sought." "Is that not why I've come?" The old man looked off into the distance as his mouth began to fade into a frown. "No, I think not." Widowmaker already knew that, of course. Even Drum could see it. "Power," he said. The elder man nodded slightly. "Is that here?" "In a sense," the wizard said, "but never enough. It is a fleeting power, one that cannot satisfy because it is not lasting." Widowmaker was silent then, seemingly scared to ask his next question, but the wizard was not going to let him ask it quite yet anyway. "This place is the land that holds all lands together. This is where all of the stories are told. That is my job here, to see that the tale-telling is continued. Do you not yet understand?" he asked, a sly smile dancing upon his lips playfully. "What this place is? This is the Perilous Realm, and it goes beyond Death Mountain, over the Donut Plains, through the Green Hill Zone at record speed, into Britannia, Waterdeep, through times long ago in galaxies far away. It is the land of Fairy, the place of dreams. But yet, even then, only a small corner of Fairy, and one only most recently carved from the hard stone that encased it. It was here that a great many people set a vision before their eyes and set it upon this land to make it into something greater. Their tools were rudimentary, and yet this place is formed by imagination mostly. And with that, they were gifted beyond measure." He took another long puff. "Then they opened it and welcomed you within, bidding you to stay and see, to watch and wonder, and to help form it yourselves for a time. Here you played, you laughed and cried, and sometimes stood up despite yourself because the intensity was too great. It was here that you told the same stories over and over again, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, sometimes you barely made it, and sometimes you were invincible. Here you met others, and you shared these tales. You shared the experience of it, using these lands to compete or to give aid to one another. It was a plaything for those who were able to see beyond the pixels and polygons into the imagination of it all, the wonder that bids us forth. Not all can see it, but when you do, you recognize this place as unique in all the lands of fairy, for it is here that you step into another story and change it and move it to your will, to your bidding. The potential is limitless. The wizard took a moment to focus on his pipe and leaned back in his chair. In a few rapid puffs, he was satisfied, and he took it from his lips again. His eyes glazed over in the memories of it all. I've seen such trials, such triumph. It has all been laid before me as people have come here to try their wits and wills against the greatest enemies in all of fairy. I've seen the foolhardy and the foolish, the brave and the bold, too. But this remains the greatest power here, and it is a power this land has to offer, and a power unique, even here in fairy, which is a land of great power and wonders you cannot even imagine. But that power is this: the reset. There was a silence at this as the wizard puffed his pipe further. He began again, lower this time. His eyes were cast into the fire as its colors danced on his face. The reset is a grave and wondrous power. You must understand. There's nothing like it. The greatest of the land's heroes have normally become thus only with a great many resets, and in that they were able to try themselves again and again, forged by the fire created here until they were strong and capable. But the power of reset is not complete, for you do not leave any of this without taking something with you. A great many do not understand this. They take on a form in this land. They come carelessly. They think that their acquired form gives them anonymity, to act certain ways and say certain things, to seek for themselves their secret desires that they wouldn't think to sate in the real world because of the consequences. But here there are no consequences, they believe. They believe the reset wiped it all away. Well, the adventure is wiped away, for sure. But we do not make any choices in life without feeling those choices later. Our lives are built on the sum of these things. But yet there is a greater grace than even this, and while fairy can teach us much about hope, it is not the source of such. The young ranger beside him furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" he said. The wizard smiled. "Oh, young man, don't you know that fairy teaches by tale and metaphor only? It is our place to do such, and we can do no other." That's not helpful," he replied. The wizard shrugged. "Stories rarely are thought as such right away, but you find in time that they have settled into your bones, and you may lean upon them when you need to. You do that for good or for ill, but in either case they are there. The reset has not taken them away at all, but bound them to one thing that knows no reset, not in this age, nor in the age to come, your very soul." He stood and put out the pipe, dumping the grounds into the fire. It flared appreciatively, and right away the room smelled all the more of the sweet, full smell of the tobacco. "You seek power here," he said. "Know that there is none to be found, not any that lasts longer than a moment. But the lust for it remains in you. What you will do with it, then, none can say. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps you will wash it clear in time. Perhaps not. I do not know. The door is there, and it will lead you back to Weatherclaw." The younger man looked perplexed. "That is why you brought me here, to encourage me to play nice?" "No," the wizard intoned. "To encourage you to play." Widowmaker 433 sat in silent contemplation of that for a moment, then shrugged it off with a forced humph and stormed out of the room. The wizard did not watch him go, but the others did. There was silence then, and for a long time. "What will happen to him?" Kai asked, breaking the silence cautiously. "I don't know," the wizard said. "But best not to be wandering around in the mist any more, eh? The next glitch you find between worlds might not be so kind. Off you go then. The door will take you home." The wizard sat and looked down, and there was a solemn understanding that he would answer no more questions. The trio looked at each other, trying to shake the spell themselves as they walked through the door and into Kakariko Village.